Boogie Down Productions, Criminal Minded. Now, again, these throwback albums are always fun for me to kind of go back and catch things maybe that I'd never caught before. And really back in the day, although I didn't listen to a whole bunch of hip hop in the late 80s, whenever it was really starting to brew and to come into its own maturity, there's a real elegance, I think, to this era of hip hop. And literally, like Beck used to say, two turntables and a microphone, right? So you've got KRS-One, who would go on to be a very big figure in the late 80s and early 90s as a hip hop, kind of pioneering hip hop artist. And his DJ Scott LaRock, who actually would pass away not too long after this album. So this is a pretty unique chunk of KRS-One's back catalog. And in retrospect, as you listen to this, by today's standards, a lot of the rhyme schemes that they were using back then seem a little bit dated. They seem a little bit clunky. Certainly, there have been people who have done a lot more complicated and more nuanced things rap-wise. But at the time, KRS-One's ability to really, again, lock into a groove and get his lyrics to come out and speak clearly in a way that made sense, I think was really respectable and was something that was really groundbreaking at the time. But I think there's an aspect of this music that you really kind of had to be there for, to be honest, because, you know, back then a lot of what they talked about was basically hip hop culture, you know, the B-boys and before this even, you know, breakdancing and that whole cultural phenomenon that went around that. But there was still this aspect too that they were talking about their experiences, where they came from, things like this. So that has a connection, of course, to the current culture, but so many of those things were really isolated to that time period, especially like there's code words going on with that stuff that is kind of lost unless you happen to be there. So although this album does seem a little bit dated from sort of a production and even to a degree an execution standpoint, I have a lot of connection with this because I remember Yo MTV Raps, that whole scene, and it's really cool for me to understand like where my interest in hip hop came from, because I did enjoy this stuff back then. I just didn't follow it very much. So getting a chance to unearth this sort of classic hip hop gem is a real privilege.